Hello and welcome to part one of this lab on lighting in Maya. It's just an introduction to the concepts of lighting and the types of lighting. In this not very brief, but brief lab, we're just going to cover the different types and some of the more common attributes and how to enable certain parts of the lighting and see some differences in the different ways to render them. Also, we're going to look at something that a couple students have had trouble with, and that's getting mental ray renderer to work. So I'm going to show you where to go, where to download, what to download, and how to install it. Alright, so let's start there. Alright, so here is the place you need to go. Well, first of all, let's go ahead and there we go. So here we have the actual address that you need to go to. Go ahead and copy this. And let's get rid of all my clipboard stuff here. And let me open up Word. And I'll zoom in. Alright, so need to go get the Mental Ray plugin for Maya 2016. If you're on a different version of Maya, you need to go grab that one. I'm thinking maybe, let's try this. I don't know if this will actually work, but let's take a look. Nope. Well, you can essentially go and then, so let's see, Mental Ray, Maya 2015. Looks like it's up to Service Pack 3. No, wait, there's Service Pack 4 right there. Alright, Service Pack 4 includes many or several important fixes. Okay, you need to go ahead and probably download the Service Pack 4. So get this first. Or sorry, this one. Okay, the damage file, DMG file. Okay, and that's for Macs. If you're on a Windows machine, I guess this one. Yeah. Alright, so once you do that, you have these two choices: Mental Ray Satellite, which is essentially an add-on, and Mental Ray Standalone. You need to go ahead and grab the satellite one. And that's just if the service pack doesn't already have it included. It probably does. Okay, so I haven't tested 2015, but this page for 2016 works fine. The first thing you need to do is download this service pack, Maya 2016 service pack, and once you get that service pack, then you can download this damage file and install it. After you do that, and then restart Maya, you open Maya, you go to your Windows drop down, you can tear it off if you want to. Alright, so to go into your settings and preferences and your plugin manager, and at the bottom of this you'll find Maya TOMR. The location will be Applications Autodesk Mental Ray for Maya 2016 plugins. You need to click Loaded and Auto Load. Well, you don't have to have Auto Load, but make sure you click Loaded, which will mean that during this session of Maya, Mental Ray will be available to you. Auto Load means that it will load every time you open Maya. Alright, So we'll go ahead and close that out, and we'll collapse this down. Alright, so that's how to get Mental Ray loaded up. Remember that once you do, if you want to use it as your renderer, you need to go and click your Display Render Settings, and under your Render Using tab, or drop down, you need to select Mental Ray. Once you do, all these other options open up for you, which we've gone over a little bit in class. It's essentially a renderer that lets you do a lot nicer renders, let's say that. For example, I can make this very simple scene, which we'll take advantage of in a moment, actually. Make a floor underneath this guy, get rid of the grid for now. Alright, we'll assign a new material to this. We'll go ahead and use a blend. We'll set the color a little bit dark. We'll set the translucence up a bit, and the reflectivity. And we'll set the color to a nice blackish color. Maybe give it a bit of transparency. We'll take the sphere, we'll assign a new material to that. We'll make it a blend. We'll set the color to a red, nice dark red, and give it just a bit of specularity, just a touch, and just a little bit of reflectivity. Alright, so we take a look at this, and we do a render using Maya software, and this is what we get. Alright, and you can tell that it's a render, but it's not a very good render. Not very clear, not very crisp. There's no reflectivity, there's no translucence. So if we turn on our Mental Ray, and even with this simple scene, you might not see much of a difference, but you will see some. Go ahead and do a render with that, and now we can see our reflection. If it wasn't black underneath this, you could see some of the translucence and the transparency things. A good way to actually see this big difference is if we add a glow intensity to this, and we'll change the transparency like so. And now if we do this render, this orb will have a glow to it. Alright, if we were to switch that out for the Maya software, you can still see a glow, but you don't see that nice transparency in the orb, or the globe, or whatever it is. Alright, so keep a long story short, if you want to do nice renders, use Mental Ray. V-Ray's another way to go, but for the purposes of this course, we want to stick with Mental Ray. Alright, now you can see a good indication of what the differences were here. Okay. Didn't have this nice reflectivity. If we added some walls around, same thing. Alright, so let's go ahead, we'll start from scratch. Alright, so one of the things with renders is your render's generally only as good as your lighting. Now, whenever we just did those renders a minute ago, what you have is default lighting, Maya's default lighting, which is essentially kind of an ambient light. It lights everything but nothing at the same time. It really kind of sucks. The best way to go about it is to add your own lights. Alright, so how do we do that? Well, it's very simple. We go to our Create panel, and we have this section of lights. Now we have mental ray only lights, which we'll get to at a later time, but right now we want to just focus on the simple lights, okay, the built-in Maya lights. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the differences of them. To do this, we're going to add a couple spheres, and we'll add a plane for a nice floor. I won't say it's nice. Okay, and we'll take all of this and move it up above the grid. I want one to be a little bit higher than the other one for the sake of the shadows. Okay. Alright, so what we have here is we have the scene lit, and the scene looks like everything's lit and everything, you know, but this is with Maya's default lights. If we actually do a render of the scene, and you can see that it's lit exactly how it looks here, except the light's coming in a different direction. We have the shadow on this side rather than this side. And although it is lit, it's not lit in a way that is going to show any kind of realism whatsoever. So what we have are these other panels here, or these other selections, and we've went over some of them. Smooth shade and wireframe, these are just activated by the 3 key for wireframe, sorry, the 4 key, and the 5 key with shaded with textures. Okay, texture is this one right here. You can turn that off or on for texture, or you can use your hotkeys of 3 and 4 and 5. Okay. Now, the other section we have are 6 texture maps. 7, 8, and 9. Which is essentially, well, 8 anyway, 7. Turns on all the lights. Well, we'll get to that in a moment. Well, later. We can turn on one light at a time, or individual lights, or we can use this and say use all lights. So what this is saying is we want to only use the lights that we have. So it's essentially deactivating Maya's built-in default lighting scheme. Here is shadows. We can turn on or off shadows. And, well, we don't have a light, so you can't really see any difference in the shadows. Okay. So let's go ahead and add a light and start looking at the different types. Alright, so let's create a light, and the first light we're going to add is an ambient light. And if you look at an ambient light, and I turn off the default lighting, what you'll see is it just drowns out everything immediately. Now we can set this up or down, and we can set our ambient shade up or down, and essentially all it really is a light that just is thrown out in all directions evenly, and it just lights the scene just like the default light. Okay? It doesn't even really show up with your shadows. Okay? For any kind of realism, you might as well just mark out ambient light from your list of possibilities. The next one we'll look at is a point light. Now, here's the one where we start to see kind of the difference in the shadows that get cast. And right now it's not even really throwing any shadows yet. Okay, and we can move this around. We can light different areas. We do a quick render. Okay, you can see what it ends up looking like, pretty much exactly what we're working with here. And that's just with Maya software. If we turn on Mental Ray, take a look at what we have with that render, we can see the shadows in the back, okay, from the point light. Okay, and the way to think of a point light is it too goes off in all directions, but it dies after a certain amount of time. Alright. As we move this light back, you can see the direction changes. But what you'll see is, the way light really works is the farther away that you are from the object, less light hits it. And this isn't really happening with this point light. And what that's called is decay. Now, as you can see here with our decay rate, right now it's set at no decay. If we change this to, say, linear, now you see that effect. The farther the light gets out, the less luminance the light projects. Now we can change the intensity if we so desire, but the effect remains the same. The farther the light gets, and the closer it gets, the more light it gives. The farther away it gets, the less light hits these objects. Okay. Also with the point light we have color that we can change. We can set it down towards a darker or a lighter color. We can also go inside of here and set it to be a particular color if we so desire. We can go in and maybe we can add some kind of texture to it, although people don't really do it. Come back out of there. Alright, maybe we can take a file. And what file do we want to use? I don't know. Let's try something on our desktop here. Let's grab this Unity picture. And what you'll find is nothing. Absolutely nothing. I mean, if you use some specialized things like to make cookies, if you don't know what cookies are, it's okay. It's just like if you're familiar with that old show Thundercats, how they would shine a light and put something in front of it to make kind of the outline of something. That's a cookie. But people don't generally use these point lights for that. For that, they would use something like a spotlight, which is what we're going to look at next. Alright, so let's go ahead and get rid of that light and look at our next one. Next one is a spotlight. Now, a spotlight is, well, it's a spotlight. It's essentially like a flashlight. Alright, you can look at the icon and see that this is the size of the cone in which the light radiates. The arrow is the direction that the light radiates. You can rotate these, which is something I didn't show with the point light, and I'll add another one in a moment just to see. Alright, so here we can see our shadow gets thrown about, and we can change the direction of the spotlight. We can swivel it around. Alright. We could, if we wanted to, set up an animation with this light. Of course, you can set up an animation with anything, so that's really not saying anything. Alright, we could change the height. Change what it's looking at all the live long day. Okay, so what you're looking at here is how large the cone is and the direction pretty much. Now if you look over here, you'll see that the spotlight does have some of the same things as a point light. For example, intensity, which bleaches out a scene very quickly. We have emit diffuse and emit specular. What this essentially says is that whenever we cast this light, we're either going to cast one of these two or both, or none. If we turn off the diffuse, we turn off all of the diffuse color information. If we turn off the specular, we'll turn off the highlights. Now with this simple scene, you can't really see any difference as far as the specular goes. But whenever we look at the more advanced scene inside of the next lab, you will easily be able to see the difference. All right, so we'll look at some of these other attributes. We have a decay rate, just the same as we did with the point light. You can see the effect here, how the light tapers off towards the back. I'll set it back to no decay so you can see kind of the difference there. The cone angle, you can see the effect on the icon itself. It makes the cone diameter at the end of the cone larger or smaller. Your pre-number angle kind of feathers the outside. You can kind of watch there and see the difference. Drop off, you can see what the drop off does. Kind of the same effect, but it makes the center more luminant, have more luminance, so it makes it brighter. So it kind of concentrates the lighting, or gives full amount to all areas. Okay. Looks like an eclipse a little bit there. You see this jaggedness on the outside of the sphere. Well, the sphere is pretty low poly, so that explains that. Alright, so that's a spotlight. And let's go ahead and create an area light. Alright, so an area light, and you can immediately see kind of what it does. With an area light, it takes one side of this box, and you can always tell which side is actually lit by this one little line in the middle, and lights everything to the sides and to the front of the area light. If I move this back, you can kind of see where the line stops shining. All right. Okay, the area light can be rotated. Okay. And here's one of the big differences between the area light and the other two. The area light can be resized. The other two that we've looked at really can't. All right, some of the attributes are the same. We have color, which you can taper it down or bleach it up. Intensity, likewise. Emit diffuse, which again, we won't really see any difference in these two until we look at the more advanced scene. And decay rates. Okay. As far as illuminates by default, we'll take a look at that. It's more of an advanced topic for lights. It's linking objects to lights. But again, we'll take a look at that at a later time. All right, I need to pause this to free up some space. One moment. Okay, we're back. Just took a moment. I essentially just had to delete the mental ray add-on and the service pack for Maya. Like many of my students, I did not have mental ray enabled by default with Maya 2016. So that's how I know that that process I showed you works. So anyway, area light. Alright, so let's take a look at the directional light. Now the directional light is kind of peculiar, and this is, well, let's go ahead and look at the icon for it, and you'll see that it's 4 arrows all pointed in the same direction, and it doesn't matter where I move it. See? If I move it up or I move it down, doesn't matter. Rotation will matter. Alright, so the only way, people say that, and it's the same thing that was told to me, was that the directional light kind of simulates sunlight. But that depends on scale. I mean, it depends on how far away from the sun you are. If we're talking about us on the Earth, then yeah, directional lights do simulate sunlight. It's always from the same intensity, no matter the distance, no matter the direction. It always hits the same place on each object. Okay? But, you know, if you're thinking of it on a larger scale, the sun is more like a point light. But if we're talking about the way light hits objects here on Earth, our natural light, then yeah, sunlight is like that, or the directional light is like sunlight in that respect. Now the thing about the directional light is you have to keep in mind scale as well here. So let's say I make a duplicate of this sphere and move it all the way over here. It's still lit the same way, even though the light is all the way over here. Doesn't matter. Okay, it's still shining on all these objects with the same intensity at the same spot on the object. Now if I rotate it, you'll see that the lighting gets changed. Okay. Alright, so some of the attributes are color, does the same thing it does in the other ones. Intensity, likewise. Emit, diffuse, and emit specular, the same. Okay? Alright, let's get rid of that. And let's take a look at a volume light. Now, I don't know a lot about a volume light. I just know that it's very similar to a point light, and it can be scaled. Although the scale doesn't really change anything a whole lot. Now you can change the light shape. It can be a box. It can be a cylinder, or it can be a cone. It's more of a, I won't say unnecessary, and I won't say not useful, but it's one of those lights that gets added in at some point where people have already made things work with the more simple lights. It's just my personal opinion. I never really bother using the volume lights, but you're welcome to add them to a scene and play around with them a bit. See if you like the effect. I never really bothered with it very much. One of the more useful things about it is the color range section of it. But Again, it's not something we're really going to cover because to me its effects are rather unpredictable in some situations. Whereas a point light, you can kind of determine how it's going to work a little bit easier. All right. All right, so that's our basic introduction to light types and their varying, but not varying so much, attributes. For the next lab, sorry this one is short, but it's just an introduction to the lighting types. The next lab is going to take a more advanced scene and start using some different lights to do some renders with it. The scene will have textures which we will add together, but it will have some new types of textures that we haven't added to any scene yet. It will be specular textures and bump textures, so you'll be able to finally see what I mean whenever I talk about a bump map. Then we will apply some lighting, and then we can see the differences in those specular, emit specular and emit diffuse settings, or those attributes for each light. You'll be able to understand exactly what they do. All right, so that's it for this session, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.